What's going on, guys? Alex here with TFLoffroad, and I'm here today in the garage with Baja Bob, our 2000 Volkswagen Beetle. Now the team just got back from taking this to Moab, and they had to drive through a snowstorm in the middle of the night to get there, and in the process they actually killed the Beetle. White smoke started spewing out from the exhaust pipes and it started running super rough, and they barely made it to Moab with Baja Bob. So Roman and Tommy actually figured out that the problem was being caused by the airbox. If you look at the front of the Beetle, it's a pretty custom front end. There's no front bumper, so there's a big open space here for snow and ice to travel up. And actually, the inlet for that air filter is kind of tucked behind the driver's side front tire. It's way up in there, and especially with these knobby tires, it's really easy for snow and ice to get caked in that air filter, and that's exactly what happened. The air filter was soaking wet, and this mass airflow sensor completely crapped out, and that caused the engine to run super rich. There was white smoke coming out of the tailpipe, and that led to a $560 repair in Moab. We were trying to figure out how to fix this, because if we just left it how it was with the repair, it's just gonna happen again with that stock airbox. So one of the ideas was to make kind of a little scoop here on the fender that would push air down into the inlet for the air intake. And the other idea was to put a snorkel up on top and either face it forwards or backwards. And that way the inlet for the air intake is way up high and there's less of a chance of the tires kicking up snow into the inlet. Now, we do want to work on that, and a lot of you guys said you wanted to see that, but that's going to be a hard process. So in the meantime, we want to use Baja Bob. So we needed a temporary solution, and that's right here. This is a cold air intake that we got off Amazon, so that'll be the new air filter that we're going to be installing. So let's get into it. Let's install a cold air intake on the Baja Bob so he's ready to go again. So here's what the kit came with. We have some mounting brackets as well as hardware for the mounting brackets. Here's the main air filter, and it already has a hose clamp installed. We have a breather filter also with a hose clamp installed already. Some piping that will connect the air filter, as well as a drop down hose, changes the diameter, and 2 hose clamps. All right, the first step is to remove this engine cover just to give myself a little bit more space to work. Before I pull the engine cover off, the dipstick has to come out because that's blocking the engine cover from coming off. So I'll just rest that down for a minute. Engine cover just pulls up from the front. There's 2 mounting points, and then there's a little screw in the back that doesn't need to be undone. It just kind of slides under it. So you pull that out, engine cover comes off, and then our dipstick can go right back in. Here's this new mass airflow sensor. We just got this one installed in Moab. There is a tiny little plastic tab that you can either pop with your fingernail or use a little screwdriver. So we're gonna pop that off. This is the air injection pump feed pipe, and it's connected to the stock airbox, so that needs to be removed. This is really easy. There's just this plastic clip right here. You just squeeze the top and bottom of it, and the hose just pulls off. Up on the top side of the airbox, there's this resonator, and that's supposed to be screwed into the airbox right there, but this is an older car, it's been worked on already, so that's been done for me. I don't have anything to remove there. The next step is to disconnect the intake hose from the mass airflow sensor, and that's just with this little hose clamp right there. All I need to do that is some needle nose pliers. Squeeze it together and then just kind of shimmy it out of the way. There we go, that's about as far as I can get it. Everything is disconnected from the airbox, and now I can actually pull the entire airbox out of the engine bay. There's only 2 bolts holding it in. One is kind of tucked way down there, and the other one's up top over on the side right there. So in order to get to that one down below, I need a ratchet with an extension and a 10mm socket on the end. All right, there's one. And there is number 2. Now the airbox is loose inside the engine bay, and I have to slip off this hose. I already took the clamp off earlier. Now I just have to wedge the hose off of the mass airflow sensor. Okay, the intake hose is disconnected, and the airbox now should come out pretty easily. See, that's where the intake hose was hooked up to right there, but we can peek on the other side and actually see what was causing the problem. There's the inlet for the air intake, which was connected to that hose right there. Now that pipe continues to the bottom of the Beetle, and you can kind of see right there where the inlet is, and that is just way too close to these off-road tires. So that's why the filter in the airbox was getting so caked with water and ice. This mounting bracket doesn't actually connect to the airbox. It acts as kind of a resting point. So it uses the stock mounting bracket from the stock airbox. And it's just going to mount up right there. And then there's 2 holes, a shorter and a longer position where you mount this other bracket. Kind of makes an L shape and just rests under the cold air intake. I'm gonna leave it kind of loose for now so that we can reposition it later without too much of an issue. And it did come with a nut, but this mounting post is already threaded, so I don't need to use that. I'm just gonna put the bolt through this mounting bracket and screw it in, but leave it pretty loose so it can move around. And I'll do the same thing for this L bracket. I'm gonna leave it pretty loose, and that'll give us plenty of room to move this bracket around and adjust it as we need to. Our new cold air intake uses this mass airflow sensor, so we have to take it off of the stock airbox. It's just 2 Phillips head screws. So one right there, the other one's on the other side. And that'll pull right out. Now I can put the mass airflow sensor back in. It connects to the intake hose, but first I want to connect this red piece of rubber tubing, which changes the diameter of the intake because it's a really tight fit. It'll be way easier to do it with the mass airflow sensor outside of the Beetle versus putting it in and then trying to squeeze this on. There we go, it's nice and flush. Slide in the mass airflow sensor and then pull the hose clamp back over. Now we're just about ready to put the new air filter into the Beetle. So there's already a hose clamp on here. We just need to take this piece of metal tubing and pop it into the air filter. There we go, metal tube is in. Just make sure it's nice and secure, and then I'll tighten this hose clamp just enough to keep it snug, and we'll go put this in. Okay, we're ready for the filter, so I'll slide one more hose clamp over this rubber hose. And here we go with our new air filter. Should just slide onto this metal pipe very easily. And there we go. So now we can bring this hose clamp up and tighten it down. Got to make sure that the clamp is all the way on the rubber hose and there's nothing slipping out. It's in, everything's still pretty loose just to check fitment, but it fits pretty well right in there, and this mounting bracket is going to work in that longer extended position. You can kind of see over here that L bracket is just gonna sit right underneath this metal pipe right here. So I'm gonna put the GoPro back on and start to tighten everything down, and we'll finish this up. Okay, everything's nice and tight. I don't want to over tighten anything, but now I'm going to work on this mounting bracket right here. Get the intake positioned properly. Grab a 10mm wrench just to hold that nut that connects the two brackets together. Make sure it's positioned where I want it, right about there, looks good. So I'll move the intake and just tighten that down. So there's a look at the new cold air intake. You can see the bracket kind of supporting it right there. It's still kind of wobbly and flimsy, but it's an Amazon air intake. This is not a K&N, and this is also a cheap Volkswagen. So that's what we're gonna live with for now, and maybe one day we'll add a snorkel. But let's move on to the little breather filter that we need to put on the end of that hose. So I'm gonna try and just twist it out, but I have a feeling it might need some heat. And yeah, that little valve on the end does not want to just twist off, so I'm gonna have to use a heat gun. Work it a little, and then hopefully it should slide right off. I'm actually gonna disconnect the hose from the pump altogether. It's the same thing we did on the airbox side. Just squeeze the two little tabs. There we go. All right, I didn't catch the moment that it popped out on camera because this honestly was the hardest part of the whole job. This took about 30 minutes just to get this valve out, and I didn't even do it right. At a certain point, it was just twisting and twisting and twisting, so I just used more heat until it came out, and in the process, kind of melted this pipe. So what I'm gonna do is just cut it right there, and then we'll put the air filter on the straight end instead of having it go to a right angle. It won't affect anything. Alright, I connected the tube back to the pump. Here's that end I just cut, but there's kind of a bigger issue, and that is that the little breather filter they sent in this kit is not the right size. So you can see right there, the diameter of the tubing is way too big, and that just moves around everywhere. So what I did is went over to the local auto parts store and found this PCV valve cover breather, and it has a bigger diameter on the back, so although the style doesn't look as good as that red filter, it's not quite gonna match the big air intake. This should do the job just fine, so I'm gonna pop this onto that tube. Now this isn't gonna be the perfect fit either, but I'd rather have it tight than too loose. So I'm gonna take this little rubber piece here and kind of wedge it into the end of this pipe, and then I'll use a screwdriver to kind of mash it in the rest of the way. Make sure it's super tight. Alright, there's what I came up with. Not too shabby. So we just have a little rubber gasket on the end there. I'll pop this hose once again back onto the pump. And then this chrome breather will just slip on. We don't even need a hose clamp on here. It's a super tight fit, so I'm just gonna twist it till it gets all the way to the bottom. And now we just need to figure out a place to secure that. There's no instructions for the kit I'm using, but I checked the K&N kit for this car because they have a much more complete kit with instructions and all the parts you need to work properly. But they say to just secure it with a zip tie to the positive battery terminal, so I'm gonna trust K&N and do the same thing with this kit. There we go. Now that breather is secured, we're getting really close. This mass airflow sensor needs to be reconnected, so just push that in, and boom. All that's left now is the engine cover. Just like I did at the start, dipstick comes out. Now this engine cover can slide back under that bolt in the back, and then pop down into place. And then the dipstick just goes right back in. So there's a look at the cold air intake all put together. You can see the air filter right there, and then that little makeshift breather I put on there. We got it done, so I'm gonna hop in, start it up for the first time, let you guys hear it. So let's take a listen. I think it sounds pretty good, so let me know what you think about the sound and the new air intake in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to go back to TFLoffroad.com for more news, views, and crazy lifted Beetle reviews. See you in the next one.